Let me admit something. There was a time in my life when I felt like I needed to have an answer for everything. If somebody asked me a question, I used to want to respond immediately because I thought that having answers meant that I was knowledgeable. But today, I think differently. One of the phrases that I become a lot more comfortable saying is, I don't know. And from being honest, it made me a much better thinker. Most of us don't like admitting when we're not certain. It feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels embarrassing. We might worry that people think we're uninformed or unprepared or somehow less intelligent. But I've started seeing it a different way. Saying I don't know isn't admitting weakness, it's identifying the starting point for learning. You can't discover something until you're willing to admit that you haven't discovered it yet. Imagine a parent not just saying that they don't know something, but going a step further and finding the answer together with their child. And then not only do you get the answer or find out, but you also teach the child how to investigate and how to find answers and that you care about what they're asking. I mean, there's just so many different lessons in that rather than trying to appear like we know everything because this is a child and we're an adult. When there can be so much value in finding out together. Like building Black Logic Media has taught me that lesson over and over and over again. I'll begin researching something and then I'll think that I already know where it's going. And then I'll find a primary source or an old newspaper or a court case or an historical document. And then suddenly my assumptions start changing. And that used to bother me, but now I actually enjoy it. Because every time reality surprises me, I know I'm learning something real. I've also learned that there's a big difference between confidence and certainty. I can be confident while remaining open to better evidence. That's healthy. Certainty, on the other hand, can be dangerous when it refuses to listen. I met some incredibly intelligent people who were just impossible to teach. And this wasn't because they lacked intelligence, it's because they had already decided that they knew everything, at least everything that was worth knowing. I think about a glass of dirty water, where the dirt just kind of sinks down into the bottom. And trying to clean that glass out, imagine just pouring clean water into it. Imagine how hard it is to clean it out. But then imagine shaking it up a little bit and just pouring half of it out and then pouring in clean water. I think you would get that water inside that glass a lot cleaner. You would get a full glass of clean water a lot quicker. I mean, it's going to take some time either way, but unless you're willing to pour some of that dirt out to make room for the clean water, it's going to take a while. You know who I enjoy learning from the most? It's people who are curious, people who ask questions, the people who aren't trying to win every conversation. They're trying to understand. And I noticed that the wisest people that I've ever met often sound surprisingly humble. They'll say things like, here's what the evidence says, or here's what the evidence suggests, or I could be wrong, or let's investigate that. Those aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of intellectual confidence. Because truly confident people don't need to pretend that they're perfect. It makes me think about when I was in the Army. Whenever we had a period of instruction, we would have what's called a check on learning. And I used to do this too when I taught weapons after the military for a defense contractor. We used to have this thing called a check on learning. So we would teach or learn, and then we'd stop, and then we'd ask questions. And we'd allow the students to ask questions, and we would check on learning, check to make sure that there was understanding. And I think the only effective way to do that is through questions. And there were times where a student would ask a question that I did not know the answer to, at least not off the top of my head, because you're talking about an operations manual. Okay, picture a vehicle, right? And you have a hull, which is the part with the part that makes it go, right? And carries things like it could be wheels, it could be tracks, the cargo space, all that, the driver, that's the hull. Then you might have a turret that has weapon systems in it. You might have a 25 millimeter chain gun, a machine gun over here. Not to go too deep, but each one of those major components has its own operations manual that's like this thick. So obviously you're not going to remember everything that's in that book. So sometimes you have to admit, I don't have an answer for that one. I don't have that answer, that exact answer. Let's look it up. Should be in section so-and-so, so-and-so. Let's take a look at it. And then the result is the student knows that I don't think that I'm perfect, and I'm not willing to tell them something false just to make it seem like I know everything. I know where to find the answers, and it teaches them how to find the answers. Because now they're not just learning the subject matter, they're learning how the book works and where you can go to find the answers. And then everybody wins. Unless you have too much pride to admit when you don't know something. So these days when I encounter something that I don't understand, I try not to rush toward a conclusion. Instead, I ask, what information am I missing? I love that question because it assumes something important. It assumes that reality is bigger than my current understanding. And from being honest, I think that's almost always true. And this mindset has made conversations much more enjoyable. I don't feel like I have to defend every opinion anymore. Sometimes I'll hear someone say something completely different from what I believe, and instead of immediately preparing my rebuttal, I'll ask another question. Why do you think that? Sometimes I still disagree. Sometimes I discover information that I'd never considered. Either way, I leave the conversation knowing more than I did when I entered it. And that's a win. Even if it's like in my previous example, an adult can learn something from a child. I remember I was in elementary school. This was a long time ago. And I had a teacher who told me, and she was adamant about it, that my hair was not black. I don't know how we got to this exchange or this part of the conversation. I don't know what led the class to this point, but She told me that my hair was not black. She was asking people about themselves, and I think that's what it was. She asked me what color my hair was, and I said it was black. And she swore up and down my hair was not black. She was adamant about it. So she went as far as to tell me that black people don't have black hair. She said that our hair was actually a really, really, really dark brown. Now, bless her heart, because she I don't think she meant any harm, you know. She just didn't know any better. But when she told me that, here I am in elementary school, but I told her that some black people do have brown hair. I know black people with brown hair. Um, Usually they have a lighter complexion than me. I know black people with red hair or lighter brown hair. Uh, I've seen black people whose hair was almost blonde. But my hair is black. She didn't like that very much because it wasn't the fact that I was black and she was white. It was the fact that I was a child and she was an adult. And she didn't appreciate having a child, I guess you could say, argue with her, debate with her. She considered it disrespectful. Now, what she could have done is she could have went and looked it up, researched it, let it go, or maybe not even said that in the first place. But there was a ton of different things that she could have done. But just as an example to my point, sometimes when you believe something strongly, or you heard it repeated, or you heard it from a certain source, you get to a point where it's kind of hard to get you not to believe that. You hold on to it because you have a need to be right. Here's something that I encourage you to practice this week. The next time someone asks you a question and you honestly don't know the answer, don't guess. Don't pretend. Simply say, I don't know. And then add one more sentence to that. Let's find out. And I think you'll discover something surprising. Curiosity is far more powerful than pretending to be certain. I've come to believe that wisdom doesn't begin when you finally have all the answers. It begins when you're no longer afraid of the question. I found that one of the most liberating phrases in the world is simply, I don't know, or I don't know yet. Because that little word yet leaves the door open for learning. Thanks for spending a little time with me today, and I'll see you in the next conversation.